and welcome to War Talks, where today we'll be interviewing Lieutenant Colonel Robert Rankine and his influence on the First World War. So please, welcome to the Skype channel, Robert Rankine.
Hello. Thanks for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
Lieutenant, please tell me about your early life before the war.
Well, I was born in Kent, England on the 29th of July 1868. And I was the only child to William Henry Rankine and Helen Darby, my parents. For my whole childhood, I lived in Kent on 22 Paget Street. On 15th of June 1890, when I was 22, I married the lovely woman named Annie Castrina Mildred Holden in the fields of St. Martin. Annie, on 11th September 1890, when I was 23, gave birth to my only son, Kenneth Caruthers Rankine. In early 1900, my new family and I moved to Melbourne, Australia, where we finally settled into Evoca Avenue, St. Kilda in 1909. For a while, I was a printer and a stationeer, until 1914, where I changed my occupation to importer.
Incredible. Secondly, enlisting in the war would be classified as suicide. Can you tell us about your life that you already had with the army?
I'd already enlisted as a second lieutenant in the 2nd Battalion of Infantry of Melbourne in December 1901. I was then promoted to lieutenant in the 6th Battalion Australian Regiment on the 10th of May 1906. Then I was fourth promoted to captain of Victorian Scottish Regiment in Elsternturn in 1908. I was then as well promoted to the AIF in the 3rd Military District on 28th of November 1914. My role was already major with the 52nd Infantry, but when I was training, I was promoted to major of the 14th Battalion.
Tell us what the AIF is and its importance to the First World War.
AIF stands for the Australian Imperial Force and was raised in 1914 for overseas war service. It was a separate volunteer work. Signing up for the AIF guaranteed you would fight in Gallipoli. 333,000 Australians had fought in the war. The Australians would also have to attack on the Dardanelles, enter Jerusalem and Damascus, defend Amiens and Ypres, and swagger through the streets of Cairo, Paris, and London. With their distinctive slouch hats and comparative wealth of 6 shillings per day. After the First War, 150,000, almost half of the AIF, had been gassed, wounded, or killed.
Tell us about your training and your life between leaving Australia and before fighting.
When I enlisted on the 28th of November 1914, I was sent to Egypt on the HMAT Ulysses 838 for my training on the 22nd of December. 20 days later, we arrived at Alexandria, which was one of the ports in Egypt. In Egypt, for our training, we had separated into 4 companies, A to D. I was the commander for Company A. We departed Alexandria on 12th of April 1915.
The First World War lasted 4 gruesome years. Can you tell us your part in the Gallipoli landing?
On 12th of April 1915, my battalion traveled to the Gallipoli landing, almost a year to when it had started. Our first assignment was to help the wounded back onto our ship, which was on the beach. We also had to collect any helpful objects on the beach that we would use to attack our enemies. On 27th of April 1815 a.m., we received orders to reinforce the 1st Division at the front and to march out Shrapnel Galley, which was one of the only pathways as well as one of our only dangerous ways to Quinn's Post. Quinn's Post was one of the most dangerous posts ever, as this was at the crest of the hill, with little to no cover. We were escaping through shrapnel fire under my command. We reached Quinn's, but we suffered many casualties from machine gun and fire. So it was extremely difficult to extract the wounded and dead We held our place until the 29th of April, where we lost a third of our men, when we had to go back to our boat and leave Gallipoli.
Tell us more about one of your more famous battalions, the 39th.
Battalion was raised in February 1916 for the AIF and was based in Victoria, and a high percentage of its personnel were from Victoria, where I lived. It was part of the 10th Brigade and 3rd Division, and served on defending the Western Front in France and Belgium. For each rank there were 1,000 men. In total, through the war we suffered 405 men killed and 1,607 wounded.
Your diet whilst in Gallipoli.
We had tin corned beef, which was also called bully beef, rice jam, cocoa, hardtacks, which I believe today are called Anzac biscuits. Back during the war, these biscuits were made from oats and water. During Gallipoli, when eating, we often faced flies always trying to eat the food. So people would have to wrap their coats around the biscuits and jam, but they still found that the flies were so quick that when the mouth was open, the flies would all rush into our mouths. Some of the soldiers that couldn't handle it starved themselves.
It's disgusting. The war ground is a harsh place. Did you leave the infantry at any time due to medical distortions?
There were multiple times where I had to discharge due to being sick. On the 1st of July 1915, I had been diagnosed with influenza. I was also diagnosed with influenza again on the 18th of August 1915. Later, on the 23rd of September, I was evacuated, suffering severe dysentery, and I was then allowed to go see my family for 6 months, from October to March, while I was discharged. But I was sent back to Gallipoli, or hell, on the 10th of March 1916.
Fascinating. What are the awards you received, and why?
I received 2 awards whilst in the infantry as Lieutenant Colonel. My first award was in April 1915, and that was the Dispatcher's Award, which is a recognition medal for service that needs attention. I received a medal for an OBE, Officer of the British Empire. My second award was a DSO, Distinguished Service Order, which is a recognition for serving in the war, specifically leading assault for an important outpost in Galbatet, near Gallipoli, holding the outpost with no relief for 5 days. No backup, no food, no water, no extra supplies, just me and my team.
Thanks to you, Robert, Australia has become a safe place for everyone to live happily, for both children and family of yours, and many others across the world. My final question is, what was your life after the war, and what happened to your next generation?
On 18th of December 1919, I happily returned to Australia when I was 51 years old, and I was happily greeted by my friends and family of Australia. I have defective hearing in my left ear due to the bombings. On 6th of June 1941, I died of natural causes in St. Kilda at the age of 73, surrounded by my family. I was cremated and my ashes were scattered, also in Melbourne. My dear wife, Annie, died on the 10th of August 1944 due to natural causes as well. My son Kenneth, he had moved to Dunmore on Avoca Avenue as well in Melbourne. He lived the rest of his life as a clerk for multiple companies. He had gotten married in 1921 to a lovely woman named Muriel, which had died 3 years before my son was having another child named Betty.
Just incredible. We can depict the pain you went through the war. An incredible story today by an incredible man. Thank you so much for coming today and Skyping us.
My sincerest pleasure, my friend.
We have today, folks. Tune in next time on War Talks.